Hello, and welcome to Shaking and Sipping. This is the show where we shake up a cocktail or other mixed drink, have a sip, look at some variants, talk about history, and see how it is. We're continuing in our quest to work through the IBA's list of official cocktails, trying each one and seeing how it stacks up. We're in Section 1, the Unforgettables, and this week's Unforgettable is the Mary Pickford. Now, the Mary Pickford, I think, is a bit forgotten, and we'll find out when we get to IBA in real life this week, but it's certainly not a drink that I'm terribly familiar with. I think Mary Pickford herself is a bit forgotten. She was one of the biggest stars of early cinema. I think people still know her name, but not incredibly well. But she was active from right at the beginning in the 1900s. Up into the talkies a bit, but her career definitely slowed down at that point, though she was one of the founders of United Artists, who's the production company who eventually got rolled into MGM and so on, but was a major player at the time. Now, the history of this drink, supposedly, is that the drink was created for her in her honor when she was in Cuba in the very early 20s with her then husband, Douglas Fairbanks, as well as Charlie Chaplin, who was Douglas Fairbanks' best friend. All three of them actually were partners in United Artists, as well as, of course, D.W. Griffith. This story is probably not true. These people all were friends, and there were times people were in Cuba and things, but there doesn't seem to be any time when these three were together in Cuba at the right sort of time period, and they were supposedly shooting a movie, which doesn't really line up. Vanity Fair years ago looked into it and couldn't find a time when this really made sense. But that's our story. Our story is that it was probably made at the bar at the Hotel Nacional de la Cuba by either a guy named Eddie Vilke or Fred Kaufman. You see both of those names. Both of those are real bartenders who were working at the time, but it's unclear that either of them had much to do with this. Though we will return to one of them later, I think, assuming that drink is on the list. I don't know. Possibly. Okay, so what is this drink? Well, it's a pretty simple one, and we're only going to have two variants today, and they're pretty close to each other because there just aren't a lot of variants of this. This is a fairly forgotten drink from what I can tell. But what it is rum-based, so we'll start with rum. We're gonna then have some maraschino liqueur in any modern recipe. It's not in the very first 1928 write-up of the drink, but by 1930 it is in Harry Craddock's Savoy cocktail book. And then we're gonna have some pineapple juice in there as well. And finally, we have an ingredient we haven't used yet called grenadine. And I think we should talk about it. Welcome to Let's Talk About Grenadine, everyone's favorite show about grenadine. Now, grenadine you may have seen in a number of drinks and behind a number of bars, and often you'll see this product, Rose's Grenadine. We're going to talk a little bit about what grenadine is and should be. So grenadine comes from the French grenade, which means pomegranate, and that is because it is supposed to be a pomegranate syrup. So traditionally, this would be made essentially of pomegranate juice and sugar. Sometimes some other ingredients in there as well, but that is the heart of it. Unfortunately, pomegranates are not cheap. So most modern brands like Rose's, made by Mott's, is mostly sort of a thin, simple syrup with some coloring in it. So this is corn syrup, water, citric acid, some stuff, and then eventually some natural and artificial flavors. This is not me doing a campaign about natural things, but it is me doing a campaign about things that are pomegranate should taste of pomegranate rather than sugar water. So we're gonna taste this as well as a little batch of grenadine that I just made up. Very simple. It is 2 parts pomegranate juice to 1 part sugar. You boil the pomegranate juice down till it's reduced by about half, add in the sugar, and then I throw in a splash, and I mean a scant splash, of orange blossom water. You put in any more than that and it will take over the whole thing, but I think it gives a nice little vibe. I also, just out of habit, throw in a shot of vodka, which theoretically makes it last longer, but really doesn't work because of the proportions, but I've done it that way for years, so I continue to do so. Pomegranate molasses, also a nice thing to add, but I don't have any, so I didn't. Let's do a quick taste of what these guys are like. Alright, so looking first at color, The homemade grenadine is much darker, much more in a purple sort of place. Still red, but in a very dark sort of place. The roses is bright red and see-through. That is, of course, because this is some sugar water with a little bit of flavoring added to it, which is by its nature clear, and then they add red 40 to make it red. So let's see what kind of flavor notes we get off of this. So there is less than no nose. Literally smells of nothing. Very sweet, so simple syrup level sweetness. There's a slight fruit taste, but it's not pomegranate. It's like currant, maybe? Sort of raspberry adjacent, but not tart. I think it's currants. And let's try the homemade. So this has a nose. It smells of sort of stewed fruits, which makes sense because, of course, we boiled down the pomegranate. So it's much thicker, and oh my goodness, it tastes like pomegranates. So this has that sweetness to it that is much more reminiscent of a product like honey or molasses, where it is a layered sweetness, and there are sort of bright spots and thick spots, and it's almost, it's not crystallized in terms of texture, but it's almost just layers in your palate. And it's tangy. It's got that tartness to it, which is really nice and a characteristic of grenadine that's just not present in this product. So the takeaway from Let's Talk About Grenadine, everyone's favorite show about grenadine, this works fine if you need to add a little bit of red color to something. If you are making a drink where the purpose of grenadine in the drink is to give some color, you can use this, leave out the simple, use this instead. It'll work out just fine for that sort of application. If you're making a drink where grenadine is a flavor component that matters, either make your own, which is not too hard at all, or seek out one of the smaller, more artisanal grenadine providers. Back to you in the studio, Stephen. All right, thank you for that, Stephen. All right, moving on to version 1, we're going to do the IBA spec, and we are going to start off with some pineapple juice. Ideally, if you have it fresh, that would be the best. That would be the best, but I don't, so we're going to use some tinned pineapple juice. We want 1.5 ounces, that's 45 milliliters. And we also want 45 milliliters, 1.5 ounces of a light rum. Now I'm using Bacardi here. You really can't get what this should be. What this should be is real Bacardi, Cuban Havana Club. But of course that is not available in the US. The Puerto Rican Bacardi is a little bit different, but that's what we've got, so we're gonna use that. And then we are gonna use the maraschino, that's in the IBA spec, and like I said, shows up very early in the drink's history. You want about 1/4 ounce of that, that's 7.5 milliliters. And then finally our grenadine, and I'm going to use the roses in the IBA spec because that's what you'll find in so many bars. We just want a little bit of this. We're looking for about 1/6 ounce. So that's about 5 milliliters, give or take. Proportion isn't incredibly crucial on this. It's such a small amount, but it is going to help with the color. And may add some flavor, at least in the homemade variant. And that's it. I'm going to grab some ice and we'll shake it up. All right, we have our big and little ice cubes. Let's shake it. You do want a pretty vigorous shake on that. Pineapple juice doesn't blend incredibly well. Then we're going to strain that into a preferably chilled coupe. which I don't think we're really gonna fill here. I need to get some smaller coupes for some of these drinks. And then IBA does not call for a garnish, so we're done. This is our IBA spec, Mary Pickford. So nose is pineapple, very pineapple. Flavor's mostly pineapple. There's not a whole lot of other things, and none of them are that assertive, so really, it's softer than pineapple juice, so the really acidic edge is rounded off. And so what you're really left with is just the sort of heart of pineapple juice flavor. The rum's not present at all. And yeah, the sweetness of the maraschino, the sweetness of the grenadine just round off the pineapple. The grenadine did give us a nice, almost a salmon color, I should say. Yeah, this would not be my choice of a drink. It really doesn't do much, and I'm not a huge pineapple person, so it's not exciting to me, but it's not bad. And if you really like pineapple, yeah, I could see sipping one of these out of doors on a rather warm day. I'm not opposed. All right, for our second variant on the Mary Pickford, we're just gonna play with some proportions and ingredients a little bit, and otherwise keep the drink essentially the same. Like I said, there's very few published variations of this, but let's make a version that just does a bit more. All right, so first we are going to again start with that same 1.5 ounces, 45 milliliters of the pineapple. But we're gonna go for a rum that has some character, some Plantation 3-Star, and we're gonna up this to 2 ounces or 60 milliliters. Then the Luxardo will keep about the same, looking for about 1/4 ounce, 7.5 milliliters. And then we're going to switch to the homemade grenadine. Again, we're going for a similar proportion, about 1/6 ounce, might be a hair more, I'd be fine with. Yeah, so that's somewhere between 1/6 ounce and 1/4 ounce, which I think is going to be okay. Plus it's so thick and sticky that not all of it's going to come out. Ideally, when you're using something that thick, you actually want to use that first so that your later washes can pull that out, but I did not do that. All right, so that's all we need. I'm gonna grab some more ice and we'll make it up. All right, and again with a big and some little ice cubes, let's shake it. All right, and again we're looking to strain that into an ideally chilled coupe. Ooh. So here's the benefit of the roses. Color. So as you can see, my homemade version is not bringing through that red dye number 40 very well, and our drink looks a bit, I don't know what color that is. A bit that color. This one we are going to garnish. A lot of variants of this drink, well, insofar as there are variants of this drink, a lot of write-ups of exactly the same drink over and over again, call for maraschino cherries. So we are going to put a couple of those on. Yeah, it's sort of a peachish color, I suppose. I'm not sure about the color. Let's try the drink though. So nose is still pineapple, but now there's a little bit of something else happening. So that's fantastic. Much better drink. So it's still pineapple is our biggest component, but I'm getting a little bit of the banana off of that rum funk. I'm getting a little bit more sweetness. I'm not entirely sure why, just the type of sweetness that's in the grenadine, I suppose. Yeah, this is much sweeter, much brighter. Still pineapple forward, but pineapple's no longer the only thing I'm tasting. Honestly, just the nose of the cherries is really nice as you're drinking it. Yeah, that plays great. Now let's see what one of those cherries does here with the drink. Yeah, the cherry pairs really well. That's sweet, but also, it's a proper maraschino cherry, so it's kind of got that barrely liqueur vibe to it. So yeah, this one is the way to go. I don't think it's going to become one of my absolute go-tos, but it will be a drink that I'd make again. Well, thanks so much for coming along on that merry Pickford journey with me this week. Be sure to check the blog at shakingandsipping.com, where you'll see a write-up on this and each other drink, as well as the day after most episodes post, a write-up of IBA in the real world, where we see what happens when we order that week's drink at a local cocktail bar. Find out if they make it often, if they have a riff on it, etc. You can follow on Twitter at shaking_sipping for Twitter-type updates and to see where we're going for those IBA in real life drinks. You should definitely do all the YouTube things and like, share, subscribe, comment, bell ring, and search cat videos immediately following this one. And that's about all I have for you. We'll be back next week with the next drink on the IBA's list, and until then, happy sipping. Cheers.